So I'm Ludovic. Thanks for first, thanks to the panelists. We're all very tired for accepting to discuss today about the ethics and responsibility in robotics. And I also thank you everyone for still being here. I know that's the last thing we're doing during the ICRA 40. So yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, so let's get into the topic. So before that, we have the idea was that I wanted to make sure that everybody can ask questions, and we mostly get questions from the audience. So follow the QR code or the URL, and you ask questions. You can vote for questions you really want to be asked, and then I'll make sure to track them and ask them. We have a little bit less than an hour to do that. We have to be done at 6:35. So yeah, let's get into that. So maybe to start, to introduce everyone, what I suggest is that I will ask everyone maybe to tell us what you think about the notion of responsibility. How did it change in robotics research over the past 40 years, since we're celebrating 40 years of ICRA? And how do you understand this notion, and how does it impact your work? Maybe in a short, 1 minute answer. Then you can also introduce yourself while we do that. And maybe let us know what it means, maybe for RAS. I would like to remind everyone that RAS mission is to benefit to produce and exchange scientific and I'm also tired. Technological knowledge in robotics and automation that benefits members, the profession, and humanity. So how does the notion of responsibility and ethics in robotics resonate with respect to RAS and its activities? So maybe we can start. Majid, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think you hear me, right? Yeah. So I'm the youngest, so I don't know about the 40 years. I read it, but I've not experienced it. So I'm Majid. I started as a professor in TU Munich last year. Yeah, I do humanoid robotics, and yeah, I don't know about the 40 years story, but it's something that is really important to me. I think a lot about it, about how to do responsible AI or robotics, not AI. Because this is something that whenever I do, whenever I end my day, I start asking, okay, why did I do all the thing I did during the day? And I think it's the most difficult question. Maybe the questions that we say it's difficult, how to solve robotics, how to solve AI, in comparison with the ethical questions are easy. So these are super difficult questions. So I'm mostly here to learn and ask questions actually. So yeah, I'll just pass to Nancy.
You just go down. So I'm Nancy Amato. I'm a professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I came to robotics only as I became a professor, actually. I did not study robotics before. But one of the things that, I came to robotics primarily actually because I saw beautiful, challenging problems and I wanted to come up with nice solutions. But what I find really inspires me today is the things that we can do with robotics that can really change the world for the better and help everyone. There's, elder care, surgical robotics, healthcare robotics. All these things that are about trying to improve life for people, right, and to make the world better. And so intrinsically in there, we have to be thinking about ethics and responsible behaviors. So even people that are working on, foundations that they don't see that really hitting the application, that's what I think we're all striving for. So we have to find a way to really embed it into everything we're doing.
My name's Kevin Lynch. I'm a professor at Northwestern University. And I guess one thing that I've been thinking about lately in the context of our new Engineering Research Center on dexterity is what impact it might have on future jobs. And two things in this process, which is ongoing, thinking about this issue. One is that we actually lack workforce in the US for things like healthcare and manufacturing. So a lot of what we do is just providing need that is not already filled, and this is something with changing demographics we have serious need in the US and many countries now. So that's one thing. But a second thing is that historically, new technology changes the jobs that are available, on different timescales, but it changes, right? And this is just the fact of life. And so when we think about what robotics, how that impacts the workforce and possibly job displacement, my default way of thinking is like, look, all technologies do that. And so when we went to talk to a large labor union to talk about what impact our work might have on their workforce and how to plan for possible impacts, they were much more skeptical, though. They felt that the chain of impact from what we were doing to their workforce was very close, as opposed to something that impacts something else, and finally impacts the workforce. So just wanted to mention that my way of thinking about job displacement, this default, is not shared by everyone. That technologies do end up changing the jobs that are available, but certainly the sorts of things that we're working on have some of our constituents more nervous.
I'm Barbara Mazzolai, Senior Scientist at the Italian Institute of Technology. I'm thinking that what we are living is a shift of paradigm in robotics, because more and more robots are designed to operate outside the factory. So during this day, we are seeing robots operating in the medical fields, but also for rescue, environmental analysis, and so on. So this means that we need to operate as technology developers to not only face these challenges from a technological point of view, but we are changing our society. So it means that we have a responsibility also, because we need to change the rules in terms of insurance. We have autonomous robots more and more that share an environment with us. So who is responsible for potential damage? We need to change law in terms of autonomous robots, because they are not vehicles. We have an ethical aspect. We need to think also the potential impact of robots into the environment I mentioned before. So the way in which we develop the robots, so the waste that we produce, so there are many responsibilities, so from different aspects. And so means that we need collaborations also with other scientists, with other communities, because probably it's not possible to face all this complexity alone as a roboticist. So we need also experts in ethics, in law, in different kind of social aspect in ethics. So yeah, and I think that is really exciting, because it means that we can create an interdisciplinary community that work together to face this future. I mean, our society will change. We are already changed. And so I think that is a great opportunity for all of us if we are doing that with a high responsibility.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. My name is Patrick. I do mostly research in machine learning and robotics. And in the last years, I've been working on ethics in AI as well. And la-di-da, go forward a few years, and now we have the AI Act. And the AI Act is a regulation that mostly promotes transparency of methodologies. And that allows you then to put additional values, like ethical values, on top of that. Now, I have difficulty translating that to robotics, right? Because a large part, as you also said, a large part of those issues that we are facing are already covered by legal frameworks. And just before, 5 minutes before we started here, I asked one of my favorite LLMs, what are ethical values in robotics? And most of the things it listed were indeed just laws that are in place anyway. So and there is a bit on transparency, perhaps, even though transparency in robotics, I don't know. And then there is a bit on serving the good of society, and I'm paraphrasing. And yeah, okay, I take that one. But apart from that, I think we need to really see what the legal framework is that we have in our jurisdictions that we are situated, and then see, well, what do we need to do on top of that?
Yeah, Tom Henderson from the University of Utah. I'll talk about the shift because I was there 40 years ago. And seems to me that science and then coming down to robotics and AI, there was, a long time ago at least, this notion that what we do, we're ethically neutral. We're scientists, back off. And the consequences of what we do is not something we worried about in general. Pardon?
I disagree.
Well, I mean, you create an atom bomb and you say it's because we can or something, but our face recognition system, and you say it's because I can do it, it's great research. And then it's used for various purposes, right? So at any rate, I think there's a large number of things that there was this ethically neutral stance that people had. We're just pursuing science. And I think that's shifted. So I think that now it's at least to the level of maybe medical doctors. We try to do no harm, although unintended consequences are not clear either. So I think in terms of responsibility, it has now shifted to this notion of more awareness of that, and perhaps even taking on larger forces to prevent misuse and malign uses of technology and science that we create.
Aude, if you want to.
We have a mic. I'm wired up. Yes,
We're all very
I was reflecting on what you just said. I'm sorry. I was not falling asleep. Okay, I'm Aude, I'm a professor at EPFL, and I want to think of myself as a scientist, although I don't know if I dare saying it from time to time. So when it comes to responsibility, there are, of course, everything that's been said before. There is a responsibility to climate change, to society, to humanity, and those challenges have become real today and probably were not that real 40 years ago. But I'm also thinking that we have a responsibility with respect to those who actually fund us. And those who fund us are the taxpayers. Those are the people who actually are not doing a job as interesting as ours. My feeling is that first of all, the amount of money that is going into research right now compared to 40 years ago is like 10 times more at least, or 100 times more. I'm not sure that knowledge has grown at the same pace. Remain skeptical. I'm happy to be proven wrong. So I'm worried that there is a shift towards self-interest in terms of publishing for my own promotion rather than promoting knowledge. So how does it affect my work? Well, for the graduate students who are in my group, you know that I'm difficult when it comes to publishing. I want things to be mature enough before they go out, such that we contribute to knowledge more than we contribute to the number of publications.
So I am Kenji Suzuki from the University of Tsukuba. So I'm working on that the rehabilitation robotics, also working together many of the medical doctors in hospital. And then just in the past 20 years of experience, regulation has been changed a lot. Like the tough needed the documentation for passing that the ILB is significantly different compared to the 10 or 20 years. I'm not sure about that because regulation is changed, but our spirit is changed or not. It's many people say about that, oh, it's annoying to pass that ILB, why that things on that. So the system is changed, but I'm not sure about that, how people's changed. So the most important thing is I believe in that is the disclosures. So this time I found out, because many of great researchers are also having some spin-off companies or working together with a company. But also, I have the two phases to present my papers or presentation in medicines. After the title of the papers, I need to disclose that the conflict of interest. This is, I have that having a stock of the stockholder of this company. I am founder of this company. I have some relationship with the company. How much we got the joint research funding from that companies. So those are, I think, not very bad things. So I think disclosure is for the first we can do that for transparency.
Well, thank you a lot. That's great because we're covering so many questions I want to ask. So I'm a bit torn because I had a lot of questions I want to ask all of you, but there's also a lot of questions that have been asked by everyone. So I suggest that we get questions not from me but from the public. So the first question, are you okay with starting with the tough questions first, because that's the first one that is the most votes. Quite a few people want to hear about the elephant in the room. Drone technology and automation have entered warfare in a big way, and I will add to it actually has implications for peace and security, right? A lot of defense organizations are funding robotics research. As members of RAS and researchers, how do we deal with our responsibilities to funders, I guess to taxpayers, to nations, and to humans in general, because we're an international organization, right? I don't know who wants to take up this question. I'm happy to take it up as a US researcher if you want to start. I mean,
start with some. So obviously, I think, like many fundamental technologies, they can be applied for good social purposes or not so good social purposes. So obviously, drones are involved in warfare around the world right now, but I don't think we would go back to 20 years ago and the people who are doing research on drones and ascribe any blame to them for that being one of the outcomes. Obviously, there are a lot of very positive uses of drones too. So this is one of those questions where I'm not certain, once the research becomes very applied, right? Once you are maybe taking a drone and then putting weapons on it, these questions become more salient. But when you're doing the basic research about how to stabilize flight and do navigation, the applications are so wide that I think it's very difficult to apply these kinds of ethical questions to that basic research. But I think it's also true for nearly all technology.
Well, I don't know if I heard the question right, but I have a couple of experiences with, recently we had an Air Force award, and it was kind of funny because it was a tech transfer award. We worked with a company to basically productize stuff that we had published, and our own MATLAB codes and stuff were online. So this is all out there, but they imposed a controlled unclassified information label on what we did. So I had students and everybody, and we had to work in one room that was not a skiff, but like a skiff. The computers were connected in an internal system that had no networking to it. We couldn't talk about it, phone about it, email about it. We could only work in the room. If you wrote anything, it had to go into locked cabinets. So we had to decide whether we wanted to accept this or not, and the point was that we weren't going to publish anything because we had already done this work, and this was really a tech transfer project, so we decided to go ahead. But it makes you stop and think, okay, do I really want to do this project or not want to do it, and you have to kind of figure out what will happen with that. There was another one, give one other one, which was some number of years ago, a DARPA contract we had in image understanding. So I was working with a guy named Bill Thompson, and working on salient feature detection, and we had this great project going, and project manager changed at DARPA, and so they were okay with what we did, and we kept going. They changed again. The middle one was, I think, Eric Krokof's. It was like, that was fine. And the next one wanted to change what we were doing and said, well, we're going to change the scope of your project. And so, actually, I think it's the only time it happened with me, but Bill and I discussed it. We returned the money. We wouldn't shift. So I think this is where, as an individual, you have to make decisions about, is this something I'm willing to go with, or is this something I'm not willing to go with? So that's kind of my experience.
Someone else wants to... So actually, if you don't mind, I will share my experience because I'm a professor in the US, but I'm one of the rare people, so I do not take any money from the defense, exactly for some of those reasons that you're saying. As a trade-off, I have a smaller group because you get less money. But I take money from a lot of other things, right, that you can question or questionable and things like that. So I'm wondering, how would you maybe advise younger researchers how to draw this line? Because as you said, there's things that we all have different opinions about different things. But for a younger researcher, I get what is really hard is to know if you can have a career and still draw certain lines of things that you think are important, whatever they might be, right? I know I was able to do it, but it's not obvious that everybody can do that, right? And I do it for certain things, not for other things. Anyone has an advice on that? Is it the end of your career if you start drawing lines like that? How can you? Does it make sense to even talk about this? Is there someone who has an opinion on that?
I'm happy to take it. So I will not put more pressure on the junior faculty at this stage, to be very honest. The system is so tough. We're evaluating people on how much money they're bringing in. But I do think that we need to address this, yes. But to address this with the other layer, those who decide on how to promote people, and to stop asking people to go out and find out as much money as possible. Going back to what I seek us doing, which is quality as opposed to quantity, it applies both to the number of papers as well as to the amount of money that one brings in. And this quest for more and more funding is, in my humble opinion, driving us in the wrong direction.
Okay.
One thing I would say about defense funding in the U.S., it makes up a major portion of robotics funding, and but it comes in many, many different flavors. And some of that defense funding is you can publish anywhere, and there's no restrictions. And so I would not have your policy where I just say I'm not going to take defense funding, because if the research that you're doing is important and anybody has access to the fruits of it, then I would be willing to. Now, if you're taking it for more applied purposes, that's when I think your own personal ethics need to play a larger role.
If I can comment on that, so I don't have a project funded by a defense agency, mainly national or European funds, but I think that as a researcher, it's also important to collaborate with this agency, because we can play and change and collaborate with them. So I know colleagues in the USA, they have beautiful projects funded by DARPA or other defense agency that are really based on science or basic principles, and not just for something say, of course, offensive or dangerous. So I think that the collaboration with this agency can change something. So can in some way share the ideas of scientists that work in a certain field. So I don't have this occasion, no, not yet at least, but I think that we can make the difference. So working with them, so maybe it's because we work with them that we can change something also in the process, so in the way in which kind of project they fund. And so I think that is also a positive aspect. I don't see, and again, it's our responsibility to decide which kind of project we want to do.
Any other?
Just one, I guess I kind of like to echo a few of the things, like what the last thing that you just finished on. I think that's really the truth, right? Everyone, you get to decide how you pursue your career, and it's up to you. And there are many different ways to be successful. I also want to pick up back on Aude's point that this pressure, it's completely changed over the course of my career, like. When I was graduating, I was hearing these stories that people would get faculty positions with just their thesis. They didn't have a paper yet. And when I graduated, I had, I don't know, just a few papers, and it was my entire thesis. And what I see happening today, there are graduate students that have records that would be a full professor. So, and I personally don't think that's healthy. And, I see there's a lot of stress in graduate students and junior faculty members, and that's not good for science, no matter what kind of science we're talking about. Another thing, you're right also, it's up to us how we conduct science. We are the people doing the research, so we can manage that. And there are a lot of good things that have happen too, like the push for open source and open science and contributing to that. That's making science more accessible to everyone. So I mean, I think there are, positive things that we can choose to amplify, and it's totally up to you how you want to work. And you can be successful. You can be successful picking any of those models.
Yeah, please.
So I would like to share also some situation in Japan too. They're similar to that all mentioned that the junior faculties right now having very high pressure to get funding. It's not like the kind of funding, amount of funding, how much that funding has been done is clearly also connecting to that evaluations. So this is very concerning because the funding is of course based on research achievement, but basically funding is a research plan. So not like that the research done. So I'm not sure about that. Also, this is saying to myself too, how much that research plan I proposed has been achieved at the end of that funding. So this is sometimes I feel that guilty for that the public, of course. I could do that. I made my best, but 80% I arrived. If it is okay or not, that was merely not evaluated because of this is my concern also to saying to myself.
Yeah. Oh,
Can I add
Ajit,
something?
yes,
Yeah.
please, go ahead.
So again, I'm no one to talk about these things, but still. So your question, I didn't really get a direct answer. So it was about should we get the defense funding or not, or funding from defense or not. To me, again, I think it's mostly a symbolic actions, right? So if you don't get funding from defense, it means that you are against defense, using your output of your research for defense. And I think it's important to send out this message. Otherwise, you can get money from everywhere and do things that are destructive or anything that is right. So I think to me, it's mostly a symbolic actions. And I would resonate, that resonates a lot with me. But
Okay, thanks.
Don't forget that defense funded the internet, right? I mean, the DARPANet was.
yeah.
So if you don't fund these things, then you don't do these things. So
But-
refusing money may also mean that that may not be a bad idea to have not done an internet.
No, but I'm just saying that it's a symbolic actions. I'm not saying so. The output might be good or bad. First of all, everything has good use and bad use. Even internet, right? It's not all good internet, right? I think this we agree. Or even when we talk about science, right? Science, it's not a neutral thing. It basically shapes our society to some extent because it's all about the space of ideas. And when we put out some idea, right, the consequence of this can be really huge. And we don't know because this is a society that we cannot predict how this action will propagate into the future. Okay, in robotics, we have dynamical systems. We know quite well how this propagate, right? But I think a space of idea is really important, and it's coming all from our society, scientific society, or from technologists or engineers. And actually, we should be really feeling responsible for that. So this is my take again, to be thinking about these kind of things.
Well, I'm talking too much, but I'll say a last little thing, which is, we're an organized society, a cooperative group of people who work on, some topic to produce and advance that field. But the results we produce, miraculous or wonderful or whatever they are, as you're saying, the uses of those are controlled by larger forces. And typically it's larger organizations with leaders who make, I'll call them random decisions, but they're decisions that promote their interests. And those are the people who will drive the uses in general of the widespread power of whatever we produce. So I think that the summary of it would be that whatever we do, money talks. I mean, that's what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think I would just want to add that the space of ideas are really important. To me, this space is huge. And when we put out one idea, it can have really huge consequence, And it basically, in technology, we know that technology changes the affordances, the space of possibilities for us, right? So I don't think we should be saying that, ideas are, neutral. They are not neutral, I think. And the people who are putting out again, I'm criticizing myself, right? I'm not talking about anybody. The person who is putting out the idea should be thinking about other aspects, right? You should be thinking about unintended consequences, should be thinking about, all types of things. This is very difficult question, I know. I mean, most of us are not equipped, at least I'm not educated very well to understand what are the social consequences, what are the economical consequences, what are the, I don't know, any types of consequences. But I think it's important to know that these are not neutral. This will change really the society. But
I think you're making research look magical here at the moment.
Yeah.
And I see it more like incremental. Most of the stuff that's being published is incremental, right? So it's hardly ever so that you think, well, this is going to change society. I mean, I never thought of any paper I was involved in, but maybe it's different for you.
coming from this research, no?
So let me kind of
Yeah.
add. So it's when we are making our discoveries or things, we don't usually know what's going to happen. And yes, we should be thinking about what could be, and sometimes things are pretty obvious. But I think what's more likely going to happen, and we've seen this happen time and time again, is that later on, something, it can be used in a way that we didn't really think about. That's what I think we should be thinking more about. How should we react when that happens, right?
Yeah.
So that's happened in many different aspects of technology lately, and it's starting to happen in our field. And I think that's what we should probably be, for me, it's like, how should our reaction be when that happens?
Thanks. I'd like to switch gears. We don't have a lot of time, and there's a lot of things I'd like to talk. And I realize there's a very controversial question that has the majority vote right now. But if you allow me, I would like to ask another question first. But then I promise I will get back to that. But just because I think I think it's an important problem. Talking about the consequences of what we do. Let's talk about global warming, and let's talk about how our work should change, maybe, or should it change with respect to environmental consequences. And one of the questions that was asked was, there's a cost in computation that is growing. Should we be worried about that when we start to, there's a massive shift in how we use compute. And in more generally, how should we think about our work with respect to actual, challenges on the planet, right? That are extremely serious for the next, maybe not for us, but for the next generation, right? Us meaning me, I'm old enough, I guess. That's what I meant. I don't know if someone wants to talk about that, and I think you already addressed actually part of the question.
Maybe.
Right? Yeah.
Of course, for me, it's fundamental. I try to share with you some ideas in this direction. I know that it's very difficult because it's not just talking about the final product, about the robot, but it's the way in which, so we have to consider all the life cycle assessment, and also how we produce the robot. So it's quite complex, but I think that it's time to consider, because of the effect of our action on the planet are evident every day. So, and since we are developing technology that has or will have an impact in our society, we need to consider more and more the impact that our technology can produce, already produce on the planet. So means that, again, insist on this point because I think that the problems that we are facing as robotics is a very beyond the robots. And so means that we need an expert in many fields. So we need electronics that is biodegradable, means that we need an expert in this. The same for energy, the materials. So then we need to collaborate more and more with these people that work in different areas if we want to develop robots that are more sustainable. And means also, it's not just come back to the prehistory. It's also generating new markets, a new scenario, because we can also training people, new researchers in this field. We can open new markets for using robots for understanding phenomena in the environment. So, of course, we need a new standard, we need new rules. So again, so that the problem is complex. But we can generate new ideas, a new position, new trends. I think that this is time for doing that. So we are exactly in the right position for changing something. But this is my position, of course.
Well, the way I see it, we can do two things, and one option is to create free energy, and free in any sense, meaning of the word, or reduce compute.
Someone else wants to.
Maybe I'd like to add that, yes, we must do that, and not only should we do that, we're the only one who can do it. We're equipped to do it. So in my spare time, I also sit on the parliament of my canton, and I can tell you that most of the politicians who have to take decision on impact any decision that has an impact on climate change are not equipped to make those decisions, because they barely know what a watt is, they barely know what how we compute certain energy. So, but we know we can easily do this computation. We can design new ways of controlling the robots and designing the robots. And this should apply to my research, and I must say, shamefully, aside from being low computation in AI, we are still using old-fashioned hardware. But maybe I truly believe that this is our role, because we are equipped technically, intellectually, to do a step change.
Okay, thanks a lot. If there's no other comments, I will go to the question that has the majority vote. If you don't mind, I will rephrase it a little bit, because it's I think it maybe tackles. Yeah. So the question is written this way: can you talk about IROS being in Abu Dhabi, and instead of I would as a I get to decide. So I would like to rephrase that a little bit as the Robotics and Automation Society and the members of this community. Should we rethink how and where we organize our conferences? And because I guess there's some issues related to Abu Dhabi. I know that, for example, the Amnesty International just wrote something about NYU, because NYU is something in Abu Dhabi for human rights violations. But it's not the only country, right? The US has problems like that. Many countries have problems like that. We have issues with visas. A lot of our colleagues cannot come to certain places when we organize conferences, right? It becomes in a world where we have more and more conflicts. How, as a community that is international and that I guess believes in certain basic fundamental principles for people, how do we navigate that such that we can make sure we can see all of our colleagues, we can have an environment that is welcoming for all of our colleagues, right? No matter what they believe. How do we tackle that? And maybe I will ask the president and the next president of RAS to start with that, or at least to say something. But I guess everyone, it's a very complicated problem, because we're in the middle of an international crisis. How do we deal with that as an international community? And sorry, I had to ask it.
Okay, but there are two questions in this, because one is about Abu Dhabi in particular, the other one is about conflict in general. So I'll take first the second part. The second part, of course, we are very well aware of, for instance, all the challenges that very concretely China, and not just China, but other countries have to go to the US. This was the case. It was obvious at IROS 2023 in Detroit, where I can give an example. For my lab, we had 4 people who had a paper who could have gone to IROS. One was a US citizen, another one was an Iranian, Chinese, and Russian. Only the US citizen was awarded a visa to go there. This is not acceptable for us as a society. We cannot do much about that. What I would have liked IROS to do is to give them the option at least to do hybrid, which wasn't the case. So what we are ensuring is really that at least for any of those cases, including for people who cannot travel for health reasons, etc., that they are allowed and they can join the conference like this. When it comes to decide on the conference location, we're revising also our handbook and our rule on this, deciding where the conference is going to be located, and put a number of criteria, and among those criteria, there is, of course, the risk that a particular location choice could entail for people who go there, but also making sure of diversity and geographical choices so that people can travel more easily. But it's a moving target. Wars, I mean, you know, they start every other month. We never know between which countries. So I really, frankly, I don't know how we can tackle that aside from making again one plea, which I did when I opened the conference, is let's work for peace and not war, but we cannot do very much about that. Now, really, do I have to talk about Abu Dhabi? Because I think everybody knows my position on this one. Does anybody not know? So yes, I was very reluctant. Let me rephrase this. When I approached the team who is organizing the conference there, I immediately told them that a lot of people had concerns about human rights, women's rights, and various other issues. And I wanted them to hear those concerns and make one step towards us. And as opposed to make one step, I got a closed door. Those who know me personally know that by any stretch of mind, I'm all but racist. But this is the problem. One needs to understand that there are human rights concerns that are very serious. There are communities that are not comfortable going there. Women's rights are not equal by any stretch of mind. This is not a reproach, it's a reality. There is no place on earth where we have actually equality across gender. One needs to acknowledge that and make a step forward whenever possible. One option is what we are doing right now, also with the streaming in Africa, is also to allow for satellite events, which can also solve the other problem. I don't know if this solves, but it's at least we should acknowledge the issue and try to find compromises. And so I regret that no offer to find a compromise were made.
So I guess maybe just one thing to kind of, you know, underscore and amplify a little bit is that RAS is geographic diversity is in like the DNA of our society. It's you all may not know that, but there are things like, if you notice, like our conferences, they rotate around the various regions of the world. So do various, you know, leadership positions and things like that. And it's one of the only actually communities I'm part of where we truly are, you know, we try to embrace the whole world, and it's a core value, I'd say, of RAS. Now, also kind of coming on, you know, we were kind of forced this way with the pandemic. We saw that there were ways to kind of do things, you know, where we didn't all have to come together in the same place all the time. So we have started with these streaming options of, you know, having satellite events, you know, coupled with our conferences. That could also help us address sustainability a little bit by reducing the amount of travel that people have to do. And it also makes it more possible for people from other parts of the world that maybe can't come to our conferences all the time participate. So I think that's on us as a society. We're really taking that seriously and trying to do that well, to enable more people to participate if they can't come for visa or cost or just their personal circumstance doesn't allow them to travel. So we are trying to do that, and it's important to us.
Thanks a lot. I don't know if someone else wants to add, otherwise I can... There's another, so I'm trying to blend a lot of different questions now because it also relates to, and I think that's what, Kevin, you started to talk about this. How do we think about our responsibility, because it has consequences on the kind of jobs that might be in the future, and maybe to put it in a bigger thing. So how do we manage our yes.
Because you are talking about the leadership, but you are not talking about the students. What are you going to do that the students are ethically motivated and behaved so that they don't plagiarize, so that they don't cheat, okay? That they teach that they read old stuff so that they don't repeat our old mistakes. Classical example, the gentleman before you was talking about dynamical modeling of two robots holding a rod. Vijay Kumar did that in 1996 with Eric Poljuk and Xiaoping, not Baichi, but so please, I mean, that's our next generation.
Actually, that's perfect because that was the last question I wanted to ask, but I'm going to ask it now. We're thinking about ethics and responsibility. So ethics in the kind of work we do and how we do our work, and I guess responsibility in terms of the consequences of our work. How do you think we should rethink education? I guess many of us are actually teaching in university level and things like that, and educating, mentoring students. How do you think maybe, or should we change the way we educate young researchers to integrate notions of ethics and mostly of responsibility, and how does it work? How do we do that?
One thing I'd say about that is things have changed. So certainly when I started in my research career as a graduate student, there was no formal ethics training. There was no formal responsible conduct of research. And now there is. So all students come in and they take a course in responsible conduct of research and ethics, not a whole course on ethics, but something. So there used to be nothing. So things have changed over time. So I just wanted to make that point. There has been a change.
Any other opinions on that?
Yeah, yes. but not enough, right?
But not enough. Okay.
Not enough. And the popular word, at least that we use in the AI community, is ethics by design, right? In the design of your system and then the whole life cycle model and so on and so forth, you take a pause in each of the steps that you do there, and you have to assure that these things are being valued. And there is, of course, a big difference in the level of deployment of AI nowadays versus robotics beyond factory floor nowadays. So we are ahead of the wave in the robotics community, I would say. But I think that needs to be done there by design as well, and it means that integration of those ethical values in each course that you teach where applicable, right? And maybe not in all mathematical courses, but anything that goes further than that, I think we have to stand still and take those things into account.
Yeah, Kenji.
So yeah, I feel also difficulty to teach that the ethics to a student, especially engineering student. As I said that, of course, regulations like ethical committees clearance are very well documented, so they can try to write in a way to pass that way. But so I'm asking the student about that. Since professor, is it possible to pass that ethical committee with this document? Well, it might be, but do you think, can you recruit your mother to be the participant of your study? And then they realize about that, oh, this procedure is needed. So maybe this is my strong statement usually. I understand about that, very hard about that to explain why this works. But the very important thing is still, from my viewpoint, even if very well documented that ethical clearance is not enough for like ethical standard. So I am always fighting and feeling difficulty.
So maybe, oh, sorry.
Please go ahead.
Can I? I think what Rosena also was pointing out is duplication of result, revisiting the wheel, essentially. I have the impression that this is unintended, that the reason why we keep seeing people revisiting, redeveloping, redoing things that were done 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years ago is often, most cases, because they just don't know. And this was, in fact, the very reason why we wanted to have ICRA at 40. We shaped the conference with a purpose in mind, and that purpose was to allow people to know what was already developed 40 years ago and even before to bring back this knowledge. And the reason why people don't know is that it's difficult to find those papers. You go on Google Scholar, it's statistical, right? It's gonna go with the most popular paper, and there were only 75 papers published in 1984, so statistically, your chance to find one of those among the volume of publication we're doing yearly is very slim. Another problem is that the quality of those papers, just like the granularity of the PDF, is very low, so it's difficult to read. And it's not an easy read, because they are not as easy to read now. I'm not saying this is good. I keep telling people not to do that and to go back and read. And in fact, what we should do and what I should do more often is really read all the references that are put by the researcher in my group and verify that they are really referring to everything that ever gets there. And even I sometimes don't know, because I cannot cope with the volume of things that are being published on a daily basis. That's the number point that I wanted to say. The second that I've noticed is that it becomes acceptable more and more for society to lie, but soft lie. When you use ChatGPT to improve your English, you're lying. You're lying about your own skills. When you do use it to change images and to make it look better, you're also slightly lying. And it's becoming more and more acceptable to do those sort of small deformation of reality. Yeah, so that's all I had to say.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I wish we had another hour, because there's a lot of questions that are being asked, and I'm really enjoying hearing what everybody has to say. Unfortunately, we have to stop, so if Tamim is okay, I will ask one last question, and that's how we go. And I'm going to try to englobe a lot of things that are being asked in the question, so hopefully I'm touching a little bit of many concerns. So I've wrote it down. So our own interest as researchers and broader social benefits are not always aligned. This can be for jobs, this can be for the environment, this can be for a lot of different things, right? For example, we benefit from public and private funding. Sometimes we lobby to get this money, right? We try to convince people to give us this money. And this can come to the detriment of other things that could be beneficial, but that are not robotics, right? Or they can come to changing jobs, or people who do not want to see certain changes in society that will happen because we do this research. I understand it's a very broad and complicated questions, but how do we, as researchers, how do we balance basically this kind of self-interest of wanting to do things we find interesting, having a thriving robotics community, right? Having a very good career, and public interest, which maybe is not necessarily the same thing, right? And I know it's a broad question, but that's how we finish the debate.
Well, I just want to make one comment. So earlier, Majid was saying that we need to think about the consequences of ideas that we put out there. So one thing I'd like to say about this, and it goes to free speech too, is I would be very concerned about trying to put limits on the ideas that we have and getting it out to the community. I'd be very concerned about that. So I'm not smart enough to look 10 years down the road and see all the consequences of everything I'm doing, but if I'm limiting the ideas that I have, that's a big problem. And that relates to the question that you're asking. So my values may not align with social values, but there are guardrails for that, and so I should not be responsible for thinking about the entire impact of everything that I do. If I think my world is revolving around manipulation, that's what I think about all the time, and I think that this is important, then I'm going to propose it to somebody who's doing an evaluation. So in our case, we need to get funding. And so there are other guardrails out there. There are other people advocating for what they think is valuable. And so I think you need to compete in the marketplace of ideas and show why what you're doing has benefit. And then there will be other people who are trying to make those decisions also. So, I just think we need to be careful about thinking that we can predict everything. And it's okay to be self-interested when we're putting out our ideas there to promote what we think is important.
So kind of like to bring back an idea that came up earlier is we all have our own specialty, but we don't know everything, right? We have to work together with everyone to try to come up with the best solution, and that's going to get us a better solution. But one other thing I'd just like to remark, many of us are faculty members, and yes, we are passionate about our ideas and we want to push them, but in fact, probably the biggest impact we have in our career is our students and training all the students that we are training, and they're going to go off and do great things. So even if we don't work on perhaps maybe the one idea that's going to change the world, one of them may, or one of their students or something. So it's the whole ecosystem, and we're part of that whole community. And I think that's one of the things that RAS has a responsibility to, is to try to nurture and give everyone that opportunity to participate in the community.
If I can
A little
jump.
thought, maybe. I heard that a butterfly can have a big impact from its chaotic. So I don't see how we could know anything about what our impact would be.
Yep, Barbara.
Just to comment, I mean, yeah, when I start to think a new idea, of course, I try to think about the potential impact, and I would like to have a positive impact, of course, but sometimes it's very difficult to predict. Is a risk in our job, and because we are living. Just to take another example, in the plastic age. No, so now plastics are everywhere. Nanoplastic are in the food chain and so on. But when it was introduced in the middle of 19th century, actually, was to limit the use of animal-based materials like the horn, the tortoise shell, ivory. No, and so it was really positive to change the use of these materials for introducing a material completely new, and also a democratic material, because it was to reduce the cost of the products in order to have a more impact for all and not only for really rich people. No? So it was really positive in the beginning, and then now we know that it's still positive, but we have many problems to solve. No? And now, again, technology maybe can help. We can try. So it's very difficult, but it's a part of our job. It's a risk that we have to consider when we do research, in my opinion.
All right, I think Stefano is putting pressure. He's just waiting for. So we unfortunately have to stop here, but I would like to thank everyone, all the panel members, for being here. That was great. And I also would like to thank the audience for being here and for asking so many nice questions. And sorry I couldn't address all of them, and sorry I made arbitrary decisions on how I ask these questions. But hopefully we do this again very soon. So thanks everyone.
Thank you for sharing your ideas.